series. This series is co-presented with Landmark on Main Street and Transition Town, Port Washington. And we have to give a big shout out of thanks to our friends from Transition Town, to Hilder, to Claire, and to Margaret, who have worked so hard to put this program together. And I would thank my own staff, but I think Hilder is going to do that. This program tonight is Break Free from Plastic. The earlier programs that we had are available to you either through Landmark's YouTube channel or on any of the event pages on our website for the upcoming programs. So if you missed it, you don't have to miss it. You can always watch it on the replay. The next two programs in the series will be Thursday, April 15th, Green Legislation, Our Future at Stake. And then Thursday, April 29th is the final program, Envisioning 2030, Decarbonizing Our Community for a Sustainable Future. So by the time we finish, we will have covered this topic from many different perspectives, but by no means from all perspectives. So we hope to continue this conversation well after these 5 programs are over. So we welcome tonight as our guest, Alexis Goldsmith, and Hilder is going to tell you a little bit more about Alexis in a minute. But I just want to spend a moment introducing our host, moderator, and our guru of all things environmental, Hilder Palsdottir. I like to say that Hilder lives at the intersection of science and spirituality. And for that reason, she brings both passion and intellect to the study of the environmental crisis and to the hope for the future. And so even as she's giving us terrible news about the use of plastic and what it's doing to our environment, she still focuses us on what we can do to make things better. And we thank you for that, Hilder. And I'm going to turn the program over to you now.
Thank you so much, Laura Mokel. I'm so happy to be here. And although I may be far away from enlightened, I'm well lit tonight. I feel illuminated. I'm sitting here at the Landmark Theater. Really pleased to be here. And I want to start with thanking the hosts for trusting us at Transition Town. Really, Laura took a leap of faith in letting us host 5 series that so far are well attended, and I'm really so pleased. I want to thank everyone who is here for being here with us, and over 100 registrants, meaning people are viewing this on their own time, receiving a recording if registered, and it's also on YouTube later on. But it's fun to be here together. We'll leave the chat open throughout, so feel free to comment throughout. We want this to be a conversation. So if something strikes you in tonight's presentation, we'll start with a presentation slides, and Alexis will give us a view into the world of beyond plastics, breaking free from plastics. But before we begin, I want to start with I want to thank not just Laura Mokel, but I want to thank Kelly Rentz-Bruno, who's been working in co-producing, co-creating this series. Our manager of community affairs here at Landmark, and technical director Sean Perry, and Landmark's house manager, who is here now, Alison Rootman. And then I want to thank Margaret and Claire, especially my co-conspirators at Transition Town, Port Washington. And the reason why we're here tonight is because plastics do not only litter and cause pollution, but are also causing climate change. This is a climate action series. 99% of plastics are made from fossil fuels, and its production doesn't just litter on macro and micro scale at land and sea, but is a significant contributor to this crisis we're taking action on in this series. Half of the plastics produced are for single use only. And packaging is there a real problem, especially plastic films. And if you think about it, it's really insane to produce materials that last forever for single use. And I wondered how we got here. And then the other day I was listening to my favorite podcast, How to Save a Planet. It's what I like to do. I really recommend this podcast, How to Save a Planet. The moderators of the episode, Recycling, Is It Bullshit? BS, sorry about that language, make a compelling case for how the industry is responsible for where we're at today. Plastics were first produced as durable goods. It's really a magical material that lasts forever and bends without breaking. Industry trends in the 60s started changing after a man named Lloyd Stouffer, editor of Modern Packaging magazine, declared that the future of plastics is in the trash can. The decision to produce plastics for single use at large scale was made by the industry in order to make profit. And a few years after his remarks, the industry celebrated a remarkable behavioral change, a cultural shift towards take and toss as a measure of progress. Consumers were filling trash cans and landfills with millions and then billions and trillions of products, and money keeps pouring in. Plastic manufacturers have successfully taught the consumer to throw away their products and thereby ensure a steady demand. And what we now know is single-use items are not efficiently recycled. Less than 10% of plastics produced have found new life with recycling, and the rest is in landfills, littering the environment, or burned up in incinerators. We must shift the blame back to the producer to incentivize the production of better materials. And that's why we have with us here tonight the national organizer for Beyond Plastics, Alexis Goldsmith. And we will be talking about how to break free from plastics, and especially a bill that has been reintroduced in Congress, the Break Free from Plastics Pollution Act. And Alexis is a true leader in the movement and was born and raised in Indiana. She lives now upstate New York. She's an alumni of Indiana University. She's a gardener. I'm pleased to share that passion. Farmer, independent journalist, and the national field organizer for Beyond Plastics. Before coming to Beyond Plastics, she coordinated a community news program for WOOC News. She has produced hundreds of interviews with a focus on environmental justice, activism, and the petrochemical build out. Welcome, Alexis. Tonight, we'll hear from you how we can break free from plastics.
Thank you, Hildur, for that wonderful introduction, and thank you all for coming tonight. It's really an honor to be the speaker at tonight's event. So before we get started, we have a poll just to gauge how many people watched the film, The Story of Plastics, prior to tonight's event. So if you could just answer the poll, we can kind of get a feel for where we're at. Ooh, a lot of no's. It's a really good film, so I highly recommend watching it after this panel, but don't worry, I'm gonna go over all the information you need to know tonight. So, okay, looks like about 2/3 of the people haven't watched it, 1/3 have watched it. So that's okay. It's a hard film to watch, honestly. It is very, I had to watch it in about 20-minute segments because it's very distressing. So watch it after the panel. But tonight I'll give you an overview of the plastic problem and really where we're at. So I'm going to share my screen. And we'll get started with a presentation. I'm going to present for about 35 minutes, and then we can do a question and answer session. So again, I'm Alexis Goldsmith with Beyond Plastics. We are a national project based in Bennington College, working to end plastic pollution. And our president is environmental policy expert, Judith Ank. She is the former EPA regional administrator for Region 2, which included New York, New Jersey, and several US territories. And we are small but mighty. There's my email. Anybody feel free to reach out to me and check out our website if you want to learn more. And I'm going to start my presentation with a land acknowledgement for the indigenous peoples of the land that I'm currently on. So it is with gratitude and humility that I acknowledge that the land upon which I live resides upon the ancestral homelands of the Mohican people, who are indigenous peoples of the land of New York. Despite tremendous hardships in being forced from their lands, today their community resides in Wisconsin and is known as the Stockbridge-Muncie community. I pay honor and respect to their ancestors, past and present, as I commit to building a more inclusive and equitable space for all. So Hilder introduced me, but I just love to show people these photos just so they can get some context on how I got here. So I am a farmer. I'm actually leasing a farm this summer. Really excited to be doing lamb again because I've been living in the city for a couple of years now. But on the left is this community news program that I helped coordinate, and I've been an independent journalist for the last 2 years, and sometimes I still do stories, but this is where I got my organizing chops. While I was on the farm, I was on the planning board of my local town, so I got involved in local politics, and then I started learning about the petrochemical build out through my journalism and started organizing for clean air in my region. So I'm going to start the story of plastics where the story really begins, which is in the ground. So as Hilder mentioned, 99% of plastics are made from fossil fuels, and specifically that's fracked natural gas liquids. Almost all plastics are made from ethane, which is a byproduct of fracking. And this, these raw materials for plastic release methane throughout the supply chain. So most people know what fracking is, I think, but if you don't, if you've never gotten an explanation of it, it is kind of hard to understand at first. But basically, fracking is where the oil and gas company will drill a well a couple of miles into the ground, and they will pump large amounts of water and sand into that well at high pressures. Each time they tap the well, they will use about 3 million gallons of water that are mixed with chemicals like benzene. And the water fractures the bedrock and releases the natural gas that is trapped within, and then the gas can be pumped out. Because the water is mixed with chemicals, and there are a lot of chemicals involved with fracking, it has a high potential for poisoning aquifers where people get their drinking water. And this flare you see is ethane gas, which is the raw material for making plastics. And each well can be pumped about 18 times over its lifetime. And the water that is used is never returned to the water cycle. It is sequestered underground. And there are thousands and thousands of fracking wells across the United States. So plastic has really boomed since the fracking renaissance in the United States. In just the last 10 years, fracking has increased at an astronomical pace. We have gone from producing 0 million tons of plastic per year in 1950 to more than 400 million tons per year today. And half of the nearly 10 billion tons of plastic that have been produced was produced since 2010. So that is an incredible increase in the amount of plastic that we're making. And this is a photo of an ethane cracker plant in Beaver County, Pennsylvania. It's under construction. It's scheduled to come online in 2022. It was delayed because of coronavirus. It was supposed to come online last year, but it's on track to be finished soon. Again, it's by the company Shell.
So can I ask you, Alexis? So fracking made natural gas cheaper, right?
Yes.
And
yep.
that has now caused the shale gas boom created more raw material. So now we're seeing more of these pop-ups. Is that right?
That's correct. Because natural gas is so cheap And because it's so plentiful, because of the sheer amount of fracking that we've done in this country, there is more natural gas now than domestic markets can soak up. There is a gas glut. So it's sitting around in storage containers, and it can be stored underground. And oil and gas makers are looking for markets to soak up all this extra gas. So they're turning to plastics, and plastics is about 20% of the oil and gas market. They're also building pipelines to ship natural gas liquids overseas to be made into plastics. So a lot of times you will hear energy companies say that this is about domestic energy security and people heating their homes in the winter, but that's not entirely true. As with all greenwashing, there is a grain of truth to things, but the reality is that much of these natural gas liquids are going to be made into virgin plastics. And this ethane cracker that you see, when it's complete, will make 1.8 million tons of virgin plastic every year. And the petrochemical industry is looking to build more of these in the United States. A report by Food and Water Watch, that is an excellent organization, and I highly recommend that everybody follow Food and Water Watch and Frack Tracker. But Food and Water Watch put out a report in 2019 called Fracking Endgame. And this report looked at how the petrochemical industry was building out in the United States. And they found that 333 new petrochemical facilities had been proposed, permitted, or were in construction since 2010. So that's an incredible increase in new petrochemical and manufacturing and refining facilities. And the American Chemistry Council is looking at where this facility is in Beaver County, Pennsylvania. It's on top of the Marcellus Shale Basin. They're looking at the Marcellus Shale Basin and the Utica Shale Basin in the Ohio River Valley as a new cancer alley, a new petrochemical corridor along the Ohio River that could support up to 5 new ethane cracker plants. And with that comes pipelines, injection wells, fracking pads, all the infrastructure that goes with making plastic. So we think the problem is bad now, but it's expected to triple by 2050. So we have got to do something to flatten the curve of plastic pollution and the climate crisis. The real tragedy is that all of this new plastic that's being made, of all of the new plastic being made, 40% is for single-use packaging. So this is very wasteful of our resources. You may have noticed in the past 10, 15 years that plastic is now in everything. And things that you didn't think were made of plastic are now made of plastic. Just to share some figures with you, less than 9% of plastic has ever been or ever will be recycled. In one lifetime, there is now 1 million, I had to do a little mental math there. In less than one lifetime, there is more than 1 ton of plastic for every person on Earth. Think of that. You sitting in your chair right now, think about 2,000 pounds of plastic next to you. That's how much plastic. And then for all of your neighbors, that's how much plastic there is in the world.
And Alexis, like in terms of recycling, less than 2% is efficiently recycled. Everything loses value when you talk about plastic. So we can recycle, aluminum and glass efficiently, but plastic, no, right?
Exactly. So recycling for plastic has been a very successful PR campaign by plastic makers and the petrochemical industry to make consumers feel like because they were putting their plastic in the recycling bin, that the problem was being taken care of. But that wasn't the truth, as people who've seen the film will know, but I'll show you in just a minute. Of that plastic, 12% is incinerated, and that number is increasing because of the amount of plastic that we're producing. 15 million tons of plastic are entering our oceans every year, affecting thousands of marine species and more than 90% of seabirds. Plastic production, I'm sorry, I said it was expected to triple. It's expected to double over the next 20 years. And I mentioned that there are 333 new petrochemical facilities, expansions of existing facilities and infrastructure. In those projects, industry has invested more than $200 billion. So they don't want to let go of these investments. They're going to do everything they can to make sure that their investments come to fruition. But there was a study done by the Marine Pollution Bulletin that estimated that the externalized costs of plastics to society, the cost that society is paying to collect plastic waste, incinerate it, the cost to the environment is $2.5 trillion every year. So plastics release greenhouse gases throughout their lifetime. They release methane along the supply chain, but they also release methane as they break down in landfills and in the environment. Methane is a very potent greenhouse gas, is 25 times more efficient than carbon at trapping heat in the atmosphere. And for many people in the world, the climate crisis is already a crisis. And unfortunately, most people who are affected by the climate crisis are the people who are benefiting the least from the system and the people that have the least amount of resources to support them. The climate crisis and plastic pollution is also devastating biodiversity. This is a photo of the climate crisis fueled wildfires in Australia last year, where more than 1 billion animals died. This problem cannot be understated. Plastic pollution in the environment readily kills wildlife, especially marine animals, because they easily mistake it for food. This is a photo of an albatross. More than 99% of albatrosses are thought to have plastic in their stomachs. They also feed it to their chicks. And what happens is, tragically, their stomachs fill up with plastic, and then they are unable to get actual nutrition, and they slowly starve to death.
Yes, and I noticed, Alexis, I noticed in the Beyond Plastic chat, we have like a group, if anybody wants to join the Beyond Plastic Action group. I noticed a post about the camel with 2,000 plastic bags in its stomach.
Yes.
And fact check that that's real. We hear about, we've heard about whales, the teasing apart of up to 100 bags, but 2,000 plastic bags in the stomach of a camel. That's accurate, right?
I saw that news article. I don't remember where I read it from. I will say that just a couple of months ago, the World Wildlife Federation put out a report estimating that we've lost 2/3 of all wildlife in less than 50 years. Now, that's not just because of plastic pollution. It's mostly habitat loss, but plastic pollution is wreaking havoc on wildlife. And there are chemicals in plastic that leach into the environment and cause fertility issues. And they're causing fertility issues to humans as well. And plastic is in us. It's in our drinking water and it's in our food. And we're eating and drinking about a plastic, sorry, getting my words mixed up. We're eating and drinking about a credit card's worth of plastic every single week. That is an incredible amount of plastic. Plastic has now been found in human placentas, and plastic makes up about 2 to 6% of dust. So we're breathing it as well. So the answer is, to stop plastic pollution, we have to stop making plastic. Those who have watched the film will know that they use the bathtub analogy, where the bathtub is full and overflowing with water, and there's a person there trying to scoop it out with a teaspoon. And the teaspoon represents recycling, but the tap of the bathtub is on full blast. So that's the image that recycling gives us now, is that to stop plastic pollution, we have to turn off the plastic tap first. So enter the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. Sorry, this is an old graphic and I haven't been able to get the new one. It was introduced by Senator Tom Udall last year. This year it's been introduced by Senator Jeff Merkley and US Representative Alan Lowenthal. And it's really exciting. It was reintroduced just 1 week ago with about 90 congressional co-sponsors and 10 Senate co-sponsors, including New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. So that's really exciting. And this is what the bill does. Sorry, did you have a question, Helder?
I wanted to just make a note that it's reintroduced, so it didn't pass the first time. Is that true?
No, it didn't go anywhere last year, but it's gotten a little bit more attention this year.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what the bill does. First, it bans certain single-use plastics that are not recyclable. This includes plastic bags, styrofoam, plastic straws, some of those really common single-use plastics that often end up as litter and that we already have alternatives for. When it bans single-use plastic bags at the point of sale, it places a fee on paper bags. So often the argument is that paper bags are worse for the environment than plastic bags. I don't know if that's true or not, but the fee is proven to help people remember to get their reusable bags out of the car. This third bullet point is extended producer responsibility. So I mentioned the externalized costs of plastic earlier. Right now, the way our waste system is structured, communities and municipalities pay for waste management. Our taxpayer money pays for recycling, incineration, and landfills, and cleanup of the environment when that happens. What extended producer responsibility does is it shifts that financial burden from the taxpayer to the producer. So to Coke, to Nestle, to anybody that makes any kind of packaging. They're responsible for the collection and recycling and management of that waste. So that's a huge piece of this bill. To complement the EPR, it creates a nationwide beverage container refund program. So in New York State, we have the bottle bill, but my home state of Indiana does not have a bottle bill. So you can't return your bottles there. But the bottle bill is proven to get people to bring back some of those materials that are most easily recycled: aluminum and glass, and PET plastic, which is actually some of the most valuable types of recyclable plastic. It establishes minimum recycled content requirements for beverage containers, packaging, and food service products. So plastic bottles have to be made of increasing amounts of recycled content, and that amount increases every 5 years. It creates incentives for investments in US domestic recycling and composting. This is huge because a huge proportion of municipal waste is organic waste that could be composted and turned into a soil conditioner to grow more food, but instead it's going to a landfill where it digests anaerobically and releases methane as it breaks down. So composting to me is just a no-brainer, and compost is really valuable. As a farmer, I'm like, I'm a total compost nerd. It prohibits plastic waste from being shipped to overseas to developing countries. This was a huge topic in the film where we learned that most of the United States recycling in quotes, up until 2017 was being shipped to China. And it's still being shipped overseas to coastal countries and countries that don't have the ability to deal with it. It protects state and local governments that want to have stronger environmental standards. And the last one is, I think, my favorite. It places a temporary pause on new plastic facilities. That is huge because we are facing a massive petrochemical build out, a massive and a rushed petrochemical build out. So if you didn't see the film, this is kind of what it looks like to live in a country where we ship our plastic waste. Some countries, they do not have the infrastructure to deal with it, and it literally just piles up in people's neighborhoods like this. And it creates an unofficial economy of waste pickers who, because they have no other economic options, they sort through the waste to find any valuable recyclables. And in the meantime, they're being exposed to toxic trash. They don't have any rights as workers. They don't get healthcare from it. It's really not a good way to live, and it's not how we would want to live. The bill is really pushing for a circular model. So it's trying to create economic incentives to phase out plastics and use materials that are actually recyclable and sustainable, materials that can be composted or recycled infinitely. And it's, again, shifting that responsibility from the local governments that are using our tax money to the producers who have not had to take responsibility for those externalized costs of plastic.
And this is the key point, that the blame was placed, taxpayers were made to take responsibility for the end of the life cycle of the product, right? Meanwhile, the producers bear no responsibility, right?
Exactly.
And that's what this, yeah, that's a key point in this Breakaway from Plastics Pollution Act. Yeah.
Right. If you watch the film, you'll know that in the 80s, plastic producers were facing criticism for the plastic litter that was accumulating because of their products. So they launched recycling campaigns where it basically said that plastic pollution is a littering problem. And if everybody just tried a little harder to recycle and to not litter, then the problem would be solved. But of course, we can't deal with this massive amount of non-biodegradable material. It's not meant to be managed. So I want to talk about some exclusions in the bill that are really important. And these are exclusions to the term recycling. So the industry is loving things like chemical recycling or things like waste to energy or waste to fuel. The argument that you can capture energy from burning plastic, and they call it recycling. I want to say that chemical recycling is not explicitly excluded in this bill, but it is a false solution. I'm going to talk, though, about two of the most common arguments, waste to energy and waste to fuel. So this is in a cement kiln in Ravenna, New York. It's an international company called Lafarge Holcomb, and it's in a town of about 2,000 people. This kiln currently uses coal to make cement, but it wants to use tires instead. It has a deal with a tire recycler to burn millions of tires every year and get paid to do that. Now, the community is fighting this really hard because tires are made of synthetic rubber, which is made of plastic. And when you burn them, you get all kinds of nasty emissions like dioxins, furans, mercury, lead, cadmium, nothing that you want to be breathing in your air, let alone burning millions of them every year. And the big thing about this facility is this is the smokestack we just saw from overhead. And 400 feet away is the Ravenna High School and Middle School. So I just mentioned that when you burn tires, you release mercury and lead. Mercury is a known neurological toxin. It causes learning problems in children. So these children would be literally going to school, playing on the playground, playing sports, right next to this facility that wants to burn millions of tires and get paid to do it. So I just want to emphasize that incinerators and waste processors are sited in vulnerable communities, and almost always they're sited in Black and Indigenous communities and in marginalized communities. This is a picture of an incinerator that's about a mile away from where I live. Now, this incinerator doesn't burn trash. It's a hazardous waste incinerator. They do burn a lot of paint and things like that. But I love this picture because it just emphasizes how difficult it is to regulate these facilities and how easy it is to have an accident. I took the picture on the left of the smog that was coming out of the facility. And on the right, a friend of mine took this picture. This happened on Martin Luther King Jr. Day of this year. So just a couple of months ago, this facility had a fuel spill, a hazardous waste spill, and the waste caught on fire and there was an open burn. And we don't know what burned in that fire or what was in this black cloud of smoke. There are other facilities involved in the waste economy than just incinerators. For example, waste processors. So this is a site that is being proposed by a company called BioHightech, another international company that wants to build this facility in the city of Rensselaer, which is a small city just south of where I live. And this site is right next to the Hudson River and right next to a public housing complex where low-income families live. What this company wants to do is build large pits, large indoor pits on top of a current hazardous waste landfill. They would truck in municipal waste into this facility and separate the paper and the plastic. The paper and the plastic would then be shredded and sold as fuel. So they're kind of a middleman in the waste economy, but they're greatly increasing truck traffic in this small town. We're talking dozens of heavy semi trucks a day bringing municipal waste to this site, and the odors that it could cause and the runoff that it could cause if there were a flood of the Hudson River. I mean, so many things could go wrong. And the kicker is that the fossil fuel economy, or the waste economy, that is dependent on petrochemicals and fossil fuels like plastics, create very few jobs. This is a report from the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives, or it's a graphic from their report. And basically, zero waste policies produce 200 times as many jobs as landfills and incinerators. So this is a really big motivator to me to switch to zero waste policies and get us off of fossil fuels. The other thing is that fracking communities, such as those in the Ohio River Valley, in New Mexico, in Texas, where they have a lot of fracking, the companies that fracked there promised jobs and economic prosperity. But this report from the Ohio River Valley Institute that was released just, February 11th, so a little over a month ago, showed that actually most of those promised jobs were outsourced to people who were far away from the local community. These jobs that were brought to Pennsylvania and Ohio and West Virginia, they were bringing in workers from Texas and Oklahoma. And the heavy truck traffic destroyed local roads. And they also found that over that 10-year period, the population had declined. So this community actually suffered a lot from fracking, and not just the environmental effects, but they had economically suffered. And plastics facilities themselves release a lot of plastic pollution. Those raw materials to make plastic get made into these little tiny pieces of microplastic called nurdles that are then made into bigger pieces of plastic. But every time nurdles are transported, they leak into the environment and they are impossible to clean up. So every plastic producer is going to be spilling these nurdles into waterways. This is Sharon Levine, and this is the face of a person who lives in the frontline community. I mentioned that frontline communities are almost always Black or Indigenous or marginalized or vulnerable in some way. Rise St. James is a community group that's fighting for MOSA plastics. Formosa is another international company that wants to build the largest plastic manufacturing plant in the United States in St. James Parish, Louisiana. And the community there is already burdened by other petrochemical facilities, and they don't want Formosa Plastics there. So they're trying to stop them. And the other thing is that when the land where Formosa Plastics is proposing to build was surveyed, they found the unmarked graves of enslaved people. And this is really a tragic story that is played out all along the Mississippi River. Cancer Alley in Louisiana and along the Mississippi River is an 85-mile stretch of petrochemical facilities, taking up thousands and thousands of acres. And the site where these facilities are, the sites, almost all of them were plantations at one point, and every plantation would have had a slave burial site. So these slaves, not only were they not free in their lifetimes, but their memories have been desecrated and their histories have been paved over. So this is a photo of a member of Rise St. James. They came to the site to bring flowers and celebrate the people who were buried there. This is what it looks like to live in a frontline community. I showed you the picture of the ethane flare earlier in the beginning. This is what it looks like in real life. I mean, is that not a picture out of hell? And anybody who's been on the Jersey Turnpike knows what it looks like and knows, would you want to live off the Jersey Turnpike, basically. And this picture of the girl fishing in the pond. You know, when I was a kid, I loved to fish with my uncle and my sister. And I can't imagine what the air there smells like or what's in that water. And this is the face of the plastics industry. Last week, just before the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act was introduced, the American Chemistry Council held a press conference to basically bash the bill and threaten Congress to not do anything to prevent them from being able to expand chemical recycling. Because as I said, they have a lot of money invested in plastics and they don't want to give that up. They don't want to be restricted on that. But you know that nobody in this group lives here. There are some changes to the bill. It's been strengthened and some loopholes have been closed since last year. It strengthens environmental justice. It categorizes incinerators as false solutions. It incorporates language justice. So if English is not your first language, you can still participate in the public process and your rights to participate in that process. It expands the lists of prohibited chemicals to include things like PFAS and orthophthalates, and it prohibits chemicals of emerging concern. So maybe chemicals that haven't yet been prohibited, but there's new data showing that they're dangerous. And it updates the definition of compostable to exclude those chemicals. So that's really important. It addresses microplastic pollution and provides money to study best practices to prevent microplastic pollution. And it expands reuse and refill programs. So I get a lot of questions about alternatives to plastic packaging. And obviously we need some alternatives, but really we need to reduce the amount of packaging that we're using and improve reuse and refill programs. In short, we cannot recycle our way out of this problem. We know that recycling is ineffective for plastic pollution, but also recycling does not address in any way those upstream problems with plastic, and it doesn't do anything for those environmental justice communities that are suffering from plastic pollution. We really have to challenge an ideology here. We have to challenge our way of thinking about the way our economy is structured and the way that our consumer lifestyles are structured. And we need to challenge ourselves to imagine that it could be different and better. This is a graphic from the Ponca tribe of Oklahoma. Casey Camp Hornick is an elder of that tribe. And she spoke at the Rights of Nature Tribunal in Paris in 2015. And the Rights of Nature movement is a legal argument that natural resources or natural ecosystems have rights to exist, are living, and should have the same rights as people. So this is a legal argument to give rights to ecosystems, basically. So maybe I should stop it there and we could go for questions, or should I talk about things that you can do? What do you think, Hildur?
Yes, and I was just noting that Guy Jacob is very active in our community. I'm just mesmerized by everything. I wanted to go back, actually. Could you go back? There was a slide with adjustments where you talked about, because I know here on Long Island, if you go, yeah, this one, there's so much you're sharing with us. There's so much content, and it feels really, I hope, eye-opening for why we want to be talking about this, because it's about lives, it's about health and wellness and the future. And the false solution like burning trash is ridiculous, and it's insane to use something that lasts forever once just so somebody can make money. It's not everybody. If everyone was making money and living well, and this was a great solution, yes. But the fact is, just a few are doing well, while especially here in New York, everything is fast. So people don't want to make the change away from single-use plastics out of fear of having to slow down. But the cost is human lives, and it's something that makes me want to reuse, refill, to not use a plastic bottle, but to use this. And even clothing, I'm wearing a cotton shirt, it goes back to fashion choices, and it says here mandating filters on washing machines. That should be law. It should be illegal not to compost. I agree with you on that. That was an earlier point. But I want to invite you to continue really with where you're at, and then we'll open up for questions, because there's so much we need to know that you're saying. So I feel like I'm digesting it, and I know everyone here in the audience as well is, there's a lot of information. We opened up the chat for people to interact with what we've heard so far, and we will follow up with resources, so the community will receive resources afterwards, so you don't have to write everything down. Would it be possible, Alexis, to share some of the slides that you're presenting?
Sure, yeah, I would be happy to share my slides with you to give to the participants after this presentation.
Yeah, so, and the same will be with the chat. We'll save the chat, and we'll direct our community over to Transition Town Port Washington website. Claire will put the link in the chat, and you can continue the conversation there as well after this seminar, so that we can, we can really work together. There are so many ways we can choose. It comes from, so I mentioned clothing, because is it true that much of the litter here on the beaches in Long Island is microfibers, right?
A lot of plastic pollution is microfibers. That's true. I saw a really fascinating presentation by a researcher. I'm sorry, I can't remember her name, that Judith had invited to her plastic class. And this researcher looked at the deposition of plastic in dust, in dry and wet dust. So she set up research stations in remote areas of national parks to see how much plastic is in the dust when it's dry and how much plastic is in the rain. And what she found was that, yes, there is plastic in dust, a lot of it, but most of it is coming from microfibers, from clothing. So her theory, which she presented, was that plastic that's in water, when there are storms or some other kind of mechanical energy that can pull pull the plastic up into the air, the plastic can rise into the jet stream and be deposited hundreds of miles from where it came from, and then it falls back down. So it stands to reason that microfibers in our washing machines are winding up in waterways. And we know that when you wash a fleece jacket, it's releasing thousands, if not millions, of microplastics every time you wash it. So there's a question about filters. You can get laundry bags that trap a certain percentage of the microfibers. You can, there are filters you can install on your washing machine. There are a few things that you can do, but it is very hard to avoid petroleum-based clothing because a lot of clothing is mixed. Even a wool sweater will have some amount of polyester in it to help it maintain its shape.
Yes, and this is why we need this bill, because once industry has to pay for the problem, they may be incentivized to, with their fantastic funds and material scientists, there's no way, we've been able to, we've been to the moon. I mean, why shouldn't we have a material, a better strategy here in terms of products? And I think this is sort of, it's a shame that it took this long, but it's great that it's happening now. And that's why I think we should all be, this slide here is really phenomenal, because we just need to be, raising awareness and saying stop, enough. And it's outrageous that us, the consumer, and when we know, we're ridden with guilt, because there's not much you can go or do when the products keep coming in, right? So it's really, recycling was never a solution. Burning will, just accelerate climate change. The waste to fuel solution is insane. Like those solutions that industry is presenting, I think thankfully science is now speaking and is loud. After the last 4 years, if you want to speak to that, the last 4 years rollbacks and this regulation that just set us back 40 years. In 4 years, there were deregulation on emissions, especially for the petrochemical industry.
It's true, unfortunately, but this is a very David and Goliath issue, but I always remember that the truth is on our side, and the truth is the greatest tool that you have to fight this issue. So that's why I put number one is learn as much as you can about plastic pollution, solutions and false solutions, and who's impacted by the problem. So watch the story of plastic, because that's really interesting, and we'll teach you about it in a way that my long, boring presentation can't. But
no, you're amazing.
But to write to your federal representatives and urge them to support the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. If you're in New York, which I think most of us are, Senator Schumer is the most powerful person in the Senate right now. And our Senator Kirsten Gillibrand is an original co-sponsor. So that's awesome. We should all be writing to Senator Schumer to urge him to support and pass this bill, bring it to a vote and pass it. We should all be writing letters to the editor targeting Schumer and our representatives to support the bill and to raise awareness about the plastic pollution issue. You can organize sorry, I just realized all my numbers are messed up. You can organize a constituent meeting with your representative, request an online meeting. You just call their office and ask for one. It can take a little bit of persistence to get one, but then you have a chance to educate your representative about the plastic pollution crisis and why they need to support this bill. So everybody here should think of themselves as educators about this issue, educators about connecting plastic to the climate crisis, connecting plastic to environmental racism, to colonialism, to environmental injustice, and educating their representatives, because your representatives are hearing from the industry about how chemical recycling is a solution and how we should just burn all of our plastic and get the energy from it. And you can you can do fun things too, like tweet at your representatives. Oh, this is how to get a virtual meeting. I'll send that to you after the presentation, but tweeting at your representatives is really fun, and it's a super easy thing to do, and they will actually see it. So on the left here, I wrote a thank you to Senator Kirsten Gillibrand for co-sponsoring the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. And I am urging everybody to use the term fracked plastic. The other thing you can do is enter our meme contest. This is another fun way to think about the plastic pollution crisis. If you don't know what a meme is, it's an internet image. It's a format, basically, where you take a blank format and you use it to spread a message. So on the left here is a meme of SpongeBob. This is a very common meme format, but I put in the paper, it says burning plastic is not recycling. Plastic must be reduced at the source. And the fracking industry is looking at that message and they're like, wait a minute, we'll take plastic and we'll call it waste to energy. And then the fracking industry is warming their hands by the fire, and meanwhile dioxins, styrene gas, and furans are being emitted into the air. And remember the arguments in your toolbox: fracked plastic and the climate crisis, environmental racism, the biodiversity crisis, the economic impacts of fracking, and zero waste jobs. You can join our Break Free from Plastic Pollution at Grassroots organizing meetings. These are bi-weekly on Fridays. I host these meetings every other Friday, and this is just a chance for organizers to get together to pass this act. And it's really fun. We have people from all over the country joining us, from California, Ohio, Florida, Indiana, my home state. So I love these meetings. And yes, the links will all be available. So that is, oh gosh, my mouse.
Oh, that was an important, let's pause at the how to follow you, because I think that's important.
Yes.
Everyone can join the movement tonight. We can all be the change makers. And yes, we'll have a resource email afterwards with links. And it's interesting because I used to be just grassroots, like bottom up kind of person. And I kind of lost faith in the political system at one point, like 20 years ago. But now I'm back in real good communication with our electeds, and it's really productive. And I want to acknowledge that tonight we have elected officials here with us. We have Veronica Lurvey, councilwoman, and New York State Assemblywoman Gina Celetti, and this is very new to me. This is why I believe we're at the sort of it's really at the we're rebirthing a new reality here in this way. It's spring. I'm ready for the conversation to be real, to get real with, you know, what's happening on Earth. You know, how do we want the future to look like? Now that we're detecting these microplastics are detected in placenta and in our excrements, in breast milk. We're feeding our children plastic. We don't even know the health consequences of that. You know, some of them are the materials used to make plastic are endocrine disruptors. You find microplastics in soil. And so, you know, things got real. So we know the data and we must change, and it's going to cost. And it'll even be uncomfortable, but really this is not a big deal. This is really easy to do. Bring your own bottle. If you can, if you live near a fracking site, don't drink the water in the faucet. And we must know that here, you know, if you're, I think I saw a study from Pennsylvania where they were like, you know, 5-year-olds had contaminants in their bloodstream that were just like 90 times what our children here have. So, you know, I don't think I have to stress that after your presentation. You made the connection for us. I think you made really a striking connection between the plastic and the fossil fuel industry and how it affects the climate crisis, how it's accelerating climate change. Thanks, Alexis.
Thank you.
And I want to invite, yes, I want to invite our community to join the conversation. If anybody has a question or wants to bring something up. I saw in the chat there were a lot of questions about filters on the washing machine, and as you know, we'd like to see it mandated. Yes, you can buy these filters and then ask for a handy person can help you. It doesn't have to be a washing machine repair person. Do you know about that, Alexis?
I don't actually. Thank you for bringing it up, though. I should learn about that.
Yeah, I have these amazing strips, True Earth laundry strips that give me a little bit of peace of mind because I'm not using the big the plastic jugs for laundry detergent. Those are just biodegradable strips. They come in these neat packaging. You have like 100 loads in like this big of a package that's in paper. And there are many wonderful solutions that we can all, you know, feel like we're doing the right thing today. We know now the connection that the blame will shift and the consumers are sitting with the guilt, but we're gonna put the blame back where it belongs. And in the meantime, we can have fun with thinking of ways as a community to break free from single-use plastics. Plastics are not all evil because in medical setting, you know, it can't be. There are uses for plastic in design of vehicles, aircrafts, something durable, lasting, and lightweight. You know, there are ways to use plastic that make sense, but you know, the single-use, everyday stir and those things have to go, right, Alexis? Do you have like everyday solutions that we should all sort of jump into right now?
Just think about what the plastic you're using is and what the alternatives are. So I haven't seen the laundry strips at my co-op or my grocery store, but I get powdered biodegradable laundry detergent in a cardboard box. And I know you can buy them online. There was a question to me in the chat about where to watch The Story of Plastic. So maybe we could drop the link for the film and the passcode in the chat so people can find it. And then I see a hand raised by Lorraine. Would you like to ask a question?
Thank you. This was really wonderful. So I'm just a little confused. I had attended the Break Free from Plastics webinar that was held last week with that woman from California that's tried to pass a lot of bills to make, you know, companies responsible for recycling. So I'm not sure the difference between the EPR and the Break Free from Plastic bill. Are they the same bill or part of each other, or what's the relationship?
Right, so that's a great question. And I was at that webinar too. So that webinar was with an environmental policy expert in California who's worked on extended producer responsibility laws in California. And she's dealt with some piecemeal laws like carpeting, paints,
Mattresses,
some other materials. So extended producer responsibility is more of like a concept legally. It can have many different forms in law. New York State Senator Kaminsky is proposing an extended producer responsibility law, but there are a lot of problems right now with the way the law is written. So the devil is in the details with extended producer responsibility. But the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act would, because it's federal, would make extended producer responsibility a national law and would eliminate those piecemeal laws, except in cases where communities want to have stronger laws.
okay, thank you.
Anybody else would like to ask questions?
Yeah. I think Lynn had a question here. She sent me in the chat. I'm wondering if Lynn, are you still here? If her audio is working, I'd prefer hearing from her.
Sure. I can ask. So you've talked a lot about, understandably, the kind of the source of the plastic and addressing it from that angle. I remember reading at some point or hearing at some point that even it, there's still sort of the existing plastic that has to be dealt with. And I'm just wondering, I guess, maybe from a community level, what you think the impact would be to focus sort of on the waste side of things, right? Like most people throw away a tremendous amount, in this area for sure. Much of that is plastic. What would be the benefit of kind of pushing in some way, whether through culture or I don't really know if legislation would work, but that we donate more, we have more of an exchange economy that, and trying to keep things out of the waste stream as long as possible, rather than constantly buying new and consuming more and more. I don't have a sense of kind of what would be the impact of that kind of an effort.
It would be huge. Social research that Extinction Rebellion bases its principles on show that a very small percentage of the population taking action can lead to monumental change. It's actually like 2.5% or something of the population making changes can lead to shifts in society. So you're absolutely right. This is a monumental task to get people to change their lifestyles. And I think the way we do that is, one, teaching people about the problem, because once you learn about this, you don't want to be part of it anymore. You want to have more choices. And two, just imagining what a zero waste economy can look like, what reuse economies can look like. For example, diaper services. These were out of fashion long before I was born, I think. I don't know, I don't remember, but basically before plastic diapers, there were laundry services that would pick up your dirty diapers and launder them and then return them to you. So those are jobs that were lost. So imagining that as a reuse model, imagining skilled seamstresses or whatever the male or they, them or equivalent of a seamstress is, fixing clothing, and tailors, that's it.
Yeah. And
Electronic-
we have,
yeah.
we have here in Port Washington, we have we have North Shore refills through Transition Town Port Washington. We have Isaac Graubart, who is if Claire could just put that in the chat, he is offering refill of laundry detergents and shampoo, and this was a project he started it during when we were all sheltered and we weren't allowed to be out and about. So he had this idea, and he's a middle schooler, and so everyone can start somewhere, but he's done a terrific job. And I see Marvin is here from Plantero, and his company is selling environmentally friendly envelopes. I know that, and I want him to put that in the chat as well. There's so many solutions. I think when we get sort of stuck in the problem sometimes, but thinking of the solutions, there's so many more solutions, and refill, reuse is really always an option if we try. And where it isn't an option, we must go to the source of that pollution, right? We can refuse certain things. We don't, like sometimes, at the store, I feel like I've got too much plastic in the shopping cart, and I'll just be like, okay, let's not have this, but it's hard because as we talked about tonight, the blame needs to be with the producer as well. And there's absolutely no way there aren't better materials in our future. Mm-hmm. There has to be a solution in the future. And I see Heather has her hand up here.
Did we lose Heather?
And I wanted to, oh wait, is she here?
No, she's there.
Heather, are you still here? Oh, good. I'm gonna ask her to unmute.
Sorry.
Something I want, yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Oh, I didn't want to interrupt you. Please continue. Sorry.
No, what's your question?
Oh, no.
Well, I just wanted to know, is part of this bill, which I think is really important, we're discouraging companies from doing the wrong thing. are there any pieces of it, or is there a way to get at it from the positive angle? Like I was saying in the chat, I know in Connecticut, my sister goes to this awesome store that's opened up there that offers everything in bulk, and everyone who goes there needs to bring their own containers. You fill your container. It's like that's how it's done. And I'd love to see enterprises like that, you know, subsidized, encouraged. Is there any provisions for that kind of approach?
I can't speak to that specifically, but I know the bill is set up to encourage reusable systems. I'm glad that you mentioned that, and people are talking about co-ops in the chat, but we have to recognize that being able to afford shopping in a co-op or even having access to a co-op requires a certain amount of privilege. So there are a lot of communities that don't have access to reusable options or the small amount of refillable options that there are. So we really do need to greatly expand those and make them more accessible. And I think that's what the bill is trying to do. But again, it's going to take more than just the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act, though this is a great starting point. And then I know Marvin, his hand is up.
Yes, and I wanted to make sure we mentioned that even if we talked about recycling as inefficient tonight, please do recycle your 1 and 2s. So I don't want people to say, oh, I'm not recycling because, you know, it doesn't work. It does work for number 1 and number 2 here in the town of North Hempstead. And there are dedicated drop-offs, and we will help with that in Transition Town, Port Washington, help with collection points at the Science Museum of Long Island. In Plantum, we'll have a collection on Saturdays for the number 5s to help community go to the right place at the right time. And Thomas Lang is here from the Science Museum. He will share information about the beach cleanup. Residents Forward are hosting, and it's really timely and wonderful conversation with our garbage commissioner. And I would like Claire to drop that information in the chat. This will all be sent in a follow-up email, but they're having a conversation about recycling with our garbage commissioner. Residents Forwards are hosting that event, and they're also hosting several cleanups coming up. So even if we have made the point that recycling is inefficient, recycling what's recyclable is important. I want to make that point. Marvin, I'm gonna ask you to unmute. I'm sorry, I didn't see the electronic hand, so I missed your actual hand. This is the world of Zoom.
Okay.
Marvin, can you see?
Hello,
Yes,
everybody.
Hi, Marvin.
I've got to be very careful about sounding self-serving because I'm very excited about what I've done in the last 20 years. And I've spoken to Hilda about this, but I would like to see an alternative product fair done over Zoom. I've said to Hilda, I've got products that replace plastic in single-use mailing. What excites me is about that all the people that you buy on e-commerce are offering free freight. So the vendors are struggling to find lower costing packaging. We have it. I don't touch plastic. I'd like to talk about it. But as I said to Hilda, I'd like to talk about it with other people who have their own ideas on what to be offering. I am totally convinced. I don't have to even hear this discussion today, although I have a lot of respect, Alexis, for what you've created and what you're driving towards. There's so many people that still don't understand what they're doing with the plastics that they're using. But we need to be discussing specific product ideas that solve the problem. Then you build up an industry of alternative products that beat out all of these products that are killing our planet. So I don't want to say any more than that, but I'd ask this one quick question, because people like Sealed Air, which is the 800-pound gorilla in the padded mailer market, how many people still use that to mail out a book when you don't need padding to mail out a book, a flat object? This is done by the tens of hundreds of millions still being done. Ask the post office why they are still providing paper and plastic that they say on the packaging that says these are made from recycled materials. Once you glue them together, there's no vehicle for separating them. Why is the post office doing this? So again, in your presentation, you're sharing with us all the things of why people are doing it, because it's money, or the products are, or people are not challenging them to make changes. This is all very grassroots. But if we put together some kind of an alternative product fair on Zoom so that you hear ideas that can be complementing exactly what you're saying to prove why we shouldn't be using plastics the way we are, we're going to hit singles and doubles. We can't hit home runs. The money is too great to be competing against on a day-to-day basis. It's grassroots. This is what we do. And that's what I want to say about it. And I invite anybody who wants to talk to me about this, by all means, do it. Then I'll get into all the detail. Thanks for listening.
I think we should do it. You and I, and many people here tonight are doers. Let's do it.
Well, they're industry leaders in Port Washington. We can all get together and really have some fun talking about alternative products. This is what has made America great. Alternative ideas that keep on replacing those things that don't work anymore. And
yes, and we can all agree that this existing model is not working.
Yes.
And I think that was really and Alexis made it so beautifully clear, the connection, that I think many people fail to see the direct connection between fracking and plastic. And we used to, to me, the disruption to the sediments is enough not to do it, to millions, if not billions of layers disrupted and life. There's plenty of reasons why we shouldn't be developing better renewables. And that's what the next session will be about, the transition to just energy solutions, really. We are here supporters of New York Renews. And that I really encourage everyone in 2 weeks to join the conversation, where we will have Gio and Ryan from New York Renews bring us up to speed on how to support them. But first, Alexis, do you want to have some final words on, a take-home message on what you would, feel like it would be support you best beyond plastics?
Definitely follow Beyond Plastics. Sign up for our mailing list, or follow us on Facebook and Instagram to get more updates. I want to mention the plastic mailers, Marvin, because you're absolutely right. Plastic mailers are a scourge, and they're so unnecessary. Many people here may know of a company called Amazon that has the largest market share of e-commerce in the world right now. And Oceana did a study of Amazon's plastic use and estimated that the amount of plastic air pillows that they used in 2019 alone would circle the earth 500 times. Now that's just straight up unacceptable, especially because they're unnecessary. Don't shop at Amazon, number one, until they stop using the secondary plastic packaging. But you're absolutely right. We do need alternatives to materials, but we're not going to get choices as consumers, or better choices or affordable choices, until we turn off the plastic tap, until we stop the raw materials, whether it's a ban on fracking or the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. Plastic continues to be the cheapest material on the market, and producers are going to use it whether you buy it or not. And the fact is 50% of waste is actually in the supply chain. Municipal waste is only 50% of all waste. So our individual actions are really important and a very important piece of the puzzle, and we need alternatives to be there. Absolutely. But we have to address the waste along the supply chain. I used to work in a grocery store, for example, and now this grocery store in particular used a lot of single-use plastic packaging, but the products came every day in big pallets that were wrapped in about 20 layers of plastic wrap. And the pallets were about 12 feet high and like this, this big wide. And we get 15 of them every day. And they were just wrapped in like 100 cling wrap rolls of plastic film, and we would fill garbage bags of them every day. And I'm like, this is the plastic waste that people don't see. So this is why we need extended producer responsibility, because those producers that are using that for packaging need to take responsibility for it. And when they have to take financial responsibility for it, they're going to want to find other ways to save money. So they're going to want to reduce their footprint. So that's what I want to say about extended producer responsibility. We really cannot solve this problem without it. I'm convinced. And a pause on new plastics facilities. And Deb Haaland, I will say, is now the first Indigenous Secretary of the Interior, or Secretary Haaland. So that is huge news. She is a really strong voice in this movement, as she's a strong Indigenous leader, and she has a lot of sway now on what we do with our public lands and the direction that the federal government is going to go. So I'm so happy that she was confirmed. So there's a lot of positive things out there. More people are learning about the issue and talking about it. And you have the truth on your side, and you need to share it.
Truth. Yes, truth is on our side. And tonight, Judith Enck is at the Oceana event that we will give you. I think they're recording, right? Mm-hmm. So the conversation we're having here tonight, and over 100 registered for, will be shared on YouTube. And we will encourage you to share with whatever community you serve or are part of. And Judith Enck, at the time, she was going to come and be here with us tonight, but she said, there's this other event at the same time. And I said, oh, is that like an overlap? And she's like, no, this conversation needs to be had everywhere, all the time right now. So she was happy to split her team. So Alexis, I want to thank you for joining us tonight and not being at the Oceana event. I'm sure a part of you kind of felt a little bit, torn on that occasion, but you really showed up for us here tonight, and we'll be happy to share the link with our community here from the Oceana event. Do you know what they were doing tonight? They were supporting the bill?
Yes, it was a rally in support of the bill. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so everybody needs to rally around the bill, because we can't, one person can only do so much, although it's important to do so much. But if your bathtub is running over, can you imagine if I was, someone was saying, hey, your bathtub is running over. I'll be like, yeah, can you turn it down like 70, no, turn it down like 35%. The faucet. We're not going to do that. Like, you turn off the faucet if it's running over. You don't, we don't dial it down. We have to make some dramatic changes for the safety of future beings, and health and safety of present beings living next to the incinerators. They are ironically forced to drink bottled water that comes in plastic containers because of the very industry that creates the plastic bottles. And if you are using plastic bottles, every little change matters. Mm-hmm. Working, filters on whether it's a washing machine or a faucet. There are so many ways, so many strategies we can be taking to reduce the use of single-use plastics. If any burning desire to share, it's 9 o'clock, and I'm really pleased that we still have 50 participants with us. Does anybody have sort of a concluding remark in addition, or a desire to share? I think we've heard what we needed to hear. And this is the first of many conversations in our community. I know Marvin will follow up. He usually does. And I want to make note of Marvin and Plantaro. It's really an honor to support Marvin's work at the Science Museum of Long Island. He feeds the hungry. How many pounds did you produce? I know Alexis will like this fact. That was 3,000 pounds last summer.
Last summer, over 5,000 pounds, and we are
Over 5,000 in
we're almost
total.
doubling
Yes.
the size of that area at the Science Museum with irrigation, with new ideas, new initiatives, new excitement. It's
Yes.
going to be a very exciting summer.
And Tom is here as well. Yeah. So
Well,
I
sure
that
that-
was something that
Yeah,
I really
stirs the drink, doesn't he?
no, because instead of feeding the hungry fresh vegetables, letting them help us create their food from ground up. This is the kind of effort we need to get behind everywhere. Learning how to live on the land and feed each other. I think it's just the most wonderful effort, and I look forward to learn more about social change. This is systemic change that we're encouraging. It's really we're not improving an existing system. We're suggesting a structural change on every level, and that's because the time is now, and we don't have time to wait. And we may be comfortable today. It may be uncomfortable to make these changes, but it has to be done, and we know why. And I was so pleased to see that Miss Karina Gore and Center from Earth Ethic was here with Eugenia was here as well. I'm gonna see if I'm scrolling through. Oh, hi, you're still here. Let's see if Eugenia, I saw she was here too. You opened up this series with an ethical and moral framework for this conversation, and it's really, that's the call to action. And so I think we're threading together a story that I think really will be ready to step into real action after. So thanks everyone for being with us tonight. It's 9:03. I promised to end at 9 o'clock, so I'm going to say thank you. Thank you for tonight. We'll share resources. We're saving the chat. And thank you for your time.
Thank
and
you all.
input.
Thank you.
Take care. Stay in
Especially Alexis. I hope, Alexis, you